I visited this village with the intention of visiting a unique attraction even for this region. The Castle of Zangla. Previously, this building was mistakenly called the monastery in many resources. In fact, the village of Zangla does not actually have a monastery, it never had one, only a nunnery. The village itself is not considered big, it has 182 households. I quickly received the keys to the fortress of the homestay where I am staying. The only condition was that I return it to them before leaving the village. They also showed the path to the fort. The ancient ruined fort is located on a hilltop 1 kilometer outside the village, believed to be 11th century. It was built centuries earlier than the Le Palace. This distance of 1 kilometer uphill is not so easy at this altitude. The last inhabitant of the fort was supposedly a Lama 30 or 40 years earlier. He was also the caretaker of the castle. Since then, it has stood abandoned, lonely on the hilltop. The building could not be visited for a long time due to its dilapidated condition, until a Hungarian non-profit organization renovated it a decade ago. Csoma's Room Foundation is a non-profit organization committed to heritage conservation, sustainable development and education, in cooperation with local communities in the Himalayan region. They are working with large number of volunteers since 2008. They started operation in Zangla, the remote Himalayan village, where Alexander Csoma de Croze compiled the words for the first Tibetan English dictionary, in 1823-24. We will return to him later, now a few words about the fortress. This partly ruined old castle was believed to have built in the 10th or 11th century by Aldate Sudgon, who was the king of Zanskar, and the youngest son of King Skildinavigan, a descendant of Lungdama of Tibet. The king has constructed 2 palaces, one each at Padam and Zangla. The castle of Zangla is considered as one of the oldest and auspicious castles throughout Ladakh, as several Rinpoche and Stulkus got birth at this place. Needless to say, the stairs are modern. The system of Lamism was established in Ladakh as well, as Buddhism made its impact here even earlier than in Greater Tibet. The Lamas of Ladakh recognized the Tibetan hierarchy. The Dalai Lama was accepted as the head of religion. But we have seen that Ladakh remained independent of Great Tibet in terms of secular power. During Csoma's stay in Ladakh, the last king reigned in the Lehi castle. A few years later, Ladakh lost its independence. The humane behavior and even a lot of wisdom of Lamism taught its adherents. When I was to Ladakh, I rarely saw a gloomy, unfriendly face, but I met even more smiling, cheerful faces. The Ladakhians have a certain benevolence, mental balance, great calmness, which is a privileged value in a person's mental constitution. The stranger, if he also has goodwill and love for humanity, among the Buddhists of Ladakh, he never feels that there is any hostile intent or hurtful dislike coming from them. The visitor is greeted with cordiality, interest and respect without condescension, even in the house of the poorest Ladakhi peasant. Here is a bird's eye view of the valley. The area visible to the human eye is huge, especially for those who are not used to such a scale. The original building complex could have been much larger. I'm going around the castle now. Typically, Tibetan structures are constructed of natural materials such as stone, clay, and wood. Many of the houses and monasteries are typically built on elevated, sunny sites facing the south. Flat roofs are built to conserve heat, and multiple windows are constructed to let in the sunlight. The four concentric square box-type layers seem to be a remnant of Zoroastrian culture. They represent the four Zoroastrian elements: earth, water, air and fire, the latter being the highest, as it is touched first by the Sun2's rays. Now we enter. This looks the first floor. This level is only partially covered. Above it is a large open terrace, which is also the roof. There is a large balcony here, and on the right-hand side is the room of the Hungarian scholar. The cell is much smaller than I thought before. It now functions as a memorial. I don't know how tall Csoma was, but my head brushes the ceiling when I straighten up. A significant part of the world's first Tibetan English dictionary was completed in this cell. It couldn't have been much more comfortable then either. Moreover, the author had to share this room with two fellow lamas. The window also offers a view of the village. Hungarian philologist Sándor Kőrös Csoma edited the first Tibetan English dictionary while living at Zangla Palace in 1823. The dictionary was published in 1824. Theodor Duker, biographer of Alexander Csoma de Crozes, and later by Ervin Bakhtay, an Indologist who visited Zangla in 1928 to identify the locations related to Alexander Csoma de Crozes. The work of Alexander Csoma de Crozes was highly appreciated by his contemporaries, who were able to judge it. Later, with the expansion of the scholarly field that he explored, the importance of his work became even more apparent. Books could be filled with appreciative opinions, which were said and written about him by scholars, linguists, and researchers of international reputation and importance. His merits were most aptly summarized by Sir William W. Hunter, his English biographer and distinguished historian. Csoma alone did more than Ptolemy's armies, and no less than Hodgson's diplomacy, to break through the Himalayas and reveal to Europe what lies behind the walls of the mountains. He had to suffer the fate that is the share of pioneers of knowledge in this world. Others entered the fields of his struggling work. The scholars of this generation saw in him a figure of blurred outline, who wandered statelessly among the Himalayan mountains, but from the heights cast a huge shadow across Central Asia. No matter how you look at it, Alexander Csoma de Croo spoke, wrote and read 17 languages, which is a superhuman intellectual achievement, even if he did not even deal with anything else his whole life. He was born in a very interesting era, which posterity only calls the Enlightenment. He was a contemporary of Kant, Hume, Rousseau and Adam Smith. This was the era before the rise of nation-states and the Industrial Revolution, which in terms of development was closer to antiquity than to the era 50 years later. The fastest means of transport was the horse, and like in Ladakh there were still communities completely isolated from the world. In a way, I envy Csoma, because he was still able to look at the world with the innocence of a child, which was still possible that time. Because of his Asian odyssey, from which he never returned, the Hungarian scholar was completely left out of the madness of modernism, which roared with the speed of a steam locomotive and changed everything forever. However, in the world that came after, no one could remain innocent. Csoma left a Europe behind forever that was not much different from archaic Asian societies today. Walking through the isolated villages and communities of the Zanskar Valley, the like of which I have only encountered in Afghanistan, I think that Europe used to be like this before the unification mania and the industrial age. A fairy tale world, the like of which is perhaps only left in Switzerland. This is the Tibetan dry toilet, which I will talk about later. Csoma's room is exactly what I thought it would be, except for its size. The blackened door is low, so even a medium-sized person has to stoop to enter. The room itself is small, stark and gloomy. The walls are completely black, because the smoke has dyed the uneven walls and thin beams of the ceiling ebony since time immemorial. Because there are no chimneys in Tibetan houses, whether there is an open stove or a small fire is lit on the stone floor in winter, the smoke spreads and slowly finds its way out through the gaps in the ceiling beams. You can only stay in such heated rooms lying on the floor. There is still relatively little smoke directly above the floor. Sitting or standing, one begins to suffocate, and the smoke makes one's eyes bleed. When winter came, Csoma didn't even allow a fire to be lit in his room, because the smoke made it impossible for him to work, read or study. In this place he, the Lama and the servant were huddled in a room, 9 by 9 feet for 3 or 4 months. They did not dare to move out of it, because the ground was covered with snow, and the temperature was well below zero. The Hungarian scholar rarely came down to this level, which seems to be a communal place. The building also includes a stable, which can be accessed from the outside through a separate door. My visit is coming to an end. Time to close the gate and walk back to the village before dark. Csoma spent only 1 year working on the dictionary here, until he had to leave. The reasons and details of his sudden departure are unclear. His biographers speculate that his stay became suspect in the eyes of the Ladakh court, as a man of the English engaged in espionage in Ladakh. What is certain is that the English showed a keen interest, not only in Ladakh but also in Great Tibet. And Csoma gained such insight into literary and religious writings like no outsider before him. At that time there were anti-English circles, but the Lhasa court also expressed its displeasure at the activities of the strange foreigner, who studied the holy texts without showing any inclination to convert to Buddhism. After all, Lama Sanji Pongkog made it clear to his disciple that he is a persona non grata in Ladakh and he should leave. The situation changed only when the Kashmiri Sultan began to threaten the independence of Ladakh, at which time the pro-British influence increased in value. Only then could Csoma return to the Ladakhi area to continue his work, but he never returned here. Ironically, the threat that resulted in Ladakh losing its independence paved the way for the rise of a new science, Tibetology. The scholar, even though he never converted to Buddhism, was the only one who earned the Hungarian Bodhisattva title with his superhuman endeavor. My childhood dream came true with this visit, as I am a great admirer of the Hungarian scholar. My journey has ended here. I am now returning to the village. It's bitterly cold here after dark. As I said, the Zanskar Valley is changing rapidly, as shown by the asphalt road and the mobile and radio tower installed a few years ago. As a result, the entire northern Zanskar Valley is now electrified. I won't give 10 years, and the isolation of the Zanskar Valley will disappear completely. And it is feared that this unique archaic Buddhist stronghold will also merge into the globalized world. Please do not get me wrong by any means. I do not regret the development and prosperity of the people here. At least, that if it is indeed development and prosperity that has already reached the other states of India. The problem, however, is that nothing else is tolerated next to modernism. It creates conditions for which there is no alternative. The problem with modernism is not that it exists as a phenomenon, but that it consumes everything around it. The time will come when there will be no place in the world to escape from it. And if development really means the dissolution of social self-organization and micro-communities and their merging into barbaric identity and uniformity, then this cannot be considered true development. Not simply because civilization is organized from below. And turning flourishing micro-communities into mass society of uprooted individuals, it's an unacceptable price. One thing is for sure, whatever they are planning, the people of Zanskar should be asked about it first. There are villages in Ladakh that are much more isolated than Zangla. The Manali-Leh highway passing through Lingsht greatly improves access to the village. This proves to be very useful when students studying in other parts of the country return home for the holidays. In winter, however, heavy snow still makes the roads impassable, not to mention the passes, which significantly reduces the accessibility of the area. Not many outsiders visit here in winter, so much so that I didn't meet another foreigner in the entire Zanskar Valley this month. But no matter where I've been so far, village life is always the same everywhere. And this is the most authentic in winter. The women gather on the main street of the village after the day's work and talk. Every village works the same way, here on roof of the world as well as in the Middle East, Central Asia, the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe. Here in winter, when people are not working outside in the fields, compared to summer, there are many more opportunities to interact with locals. The day is over and the main street of the village, which is pretty much the only road to our village, becomes quiet, giving way to the calm of the evening. This morning I leave Zangla village and head back to Padam. I have two options. Since there is no one going to Padam from Zangla who can take me, I either walk the distance, which takes 6 hours, or hail a car or a taxi. Either case I must descend to the main road on foot. That alone means a 20-minute walk, or even more in my case. Going downhill is easier and I slowly leave the village. However, the main road is still far from the edge of the village. In the Himalayan regions of India, a gate marks the entrance to the village, but it is not directly at the end of the village. The development of the area is also indicated by the fact that even the access road is paved here. I say goodbye with this, see you in the next part.